Today, let's make a very scrappy looking quilt that only uses print layer cakes, which are a 10-inch square. Now, we will be combining two fan favorite blocks, which are a log cabin block and a half square triangle. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, with all of your print 10-inch squares, we are going to start by cutting a 2.5-inch by 10-inch rectangle on the left side. Then lastly, a 2.5-inch by 7.5-inch rectangle off the top. Now, if you have a rotating mat, this will definitely come in handy right about now. And that's it so far. You're just going to repeat this to all of your print 10-inch squares. Now, while I start cutting my layer cakes up, let me go ahead and mention a few things. This is my latest scrappy quilt pattern called Dicey Log Cabin, which is available as a free PDF download, and the link for that will be down below in the description. Now, Dicey Log Cabin is also available in 5 quilt sizes, including baby, throw, twin, queen, and king. Now, for reference, one pack of layer cake will make a throw size, just to give you an idea. But after you have cut up all of your layer cake squares, it's now time to go ahead and piece everything back together. So first, we are going to be creating a very easy log cabin block. What you're going to do is start by taking a square followed by one 2.5-inch by 7.5-inch rectangle and one 2.5-inch by 10-inch rectangle. Now, you're going to want to make sure that these rectangles are a different print from the squares, but that the two rectangles are at least matching prints. And what you're going to do is start sewing that 2.5-inch by 7.5-inch rectangle to the top of the square first, then followed by the 2.5-inch by 10-inch rectangle to the left side. Now, please take note that the 2.5-inch by 10-inch rectangle will be longer than what is needed. Now, what I am going to do is have that excess tail hang towards the bottom of the block. That way, the top prints for the rectangles will kind of match up and kind of line up. So that way, it will kind of create like this seamless look. But after you sewed it together, trim off that excess fabric, or what you can do is sew all of your log cabin blocks together first, then afterwards we can trim off the excess fabric all at the same time, which is the step that I am going to do. And here we are. All of my log cabins are finished, so then let's go ahead and now trim them up. Now we need to create a 9.5-inch square, which it pretty much should be, and you should only have to trim off that little bit of fabric. But because I don't have a square ruler in that size or kind of close to that size, what I'm going to use is use my rectangular ruler and line up a straight line at the top of the block here, and then line up the edge of the quilt ruler on the right side. Then go ahead and trim. Now I'll trim a couple more blocks just to show you, just in case, but it's pretty easy and pretty simple, especially if you kind of do it all at once. Now, here are all of the log cabin blocks trimmed, and for the throw size, this is all of the fabric waste that will be getting wasted, which I would say is pretty little. But let's go ahead and make part 2 of this quilt block. And what we're going to do is take half of the log cabin blocks that you just made, and now please pay close attention to this next bit. I can't stress it enough. And I'm actually going to grab a different block so we can see it a little bit more clearly. Now here I have the rectangle strips of that outer log cabin on the top and left side, but we are going to flip it over to the wrong side. Now you can still kind of see the different prints of fabrics and also the seams, but what you're going to do is draw a 45-degree line from corner to corner with a fabric marking tool. Now I'm going to pause this because once again, please take note of the fabric placement and the seams, because if you happen to draw a line on the opposite side, your quilt block is going to come out very, very different. Now I'm going to do one more to triple express how important this step is, but I promise it's not rocket science. So let me go ahead and grab one more log cabin block, and we are going to flip it over on the wrong side, and we are going to draw that 45-degree line from corner to corner with a fabric marking tool. Now I did use a pen because I want you to see it all pretty clearly on camera. And when you are drawing this line, do take your time, especially going over those seam allowance because it can kind of get a little weird, let's just say, and it can be a little difficult, especially with some fabric marking tools because it may not play nice. But do take your time and draw that line as best as you can. Now, after half of your blocks have that line on the wrong side of fabric, you're going to take one block that doesn't have that line drawn and one block that does have the line drawn on the wrong side. And you're going to place them right sides together. But once again, very important note right here. Please make sure the strip outer section of that log cabin block are opposite of each other on the diagonal. Then what you're going to do is sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides of the line you just drew down that center. But be very careful sewing over those seams and do take your time because it does get bulky. Then afterwards, either using fabric scissors or a rotary cutter, you're going to cut on that line you had drawn. Now, I highly recommend using a rotary cutter because those seams do create that bulky area which can be difficult to cut with scissors. But after you cut it, whichever way, you will be now left with two half square triangles that are a 9-inch square. Now you can see that these blocks may look exactly the same, but they are technically mirrored blocks. Now you will also have one block that will have a triangle seam right here from when we created the log cabin block, which this is why I wanted to line up those prints during the log cabin step. So at this stage, it does look kind of seamless. But let's go ahead and get started and repeat this step one more time just in case. Now you're going to take one block that doesn't have the line drawn on the wrong side and one block that does have that line drawn. And you're going to place them right sides together, but make sure that strip section of the log cabin blocks are opposites of each other on the diagonal. Then you're going to sew that 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides of that line you drew. And just be careful once again sewing over those seams. And then here I will be using a rotary cutter to show you how much easier it is to cut on that line. But then you'll be, of course, left with two half square triangles that are now a 9-inch square. So you're just going to go ahead and repeat these last few steps to complete all of your quilt blocks for the quilt size you are making. Now it is time to lay your quilt out and get ready to show your improv side. Now the beauty of this quilt is that it is extremely scrappy looking since the matching blocks are technically mirrored blocks, but there are no rules to this layout. Now what I'm going to do is try and rotate the blocks to avoid matching seams. Now within the PDF pattern, use that chart to tell you how many blocks per row and how many rows per quilt. Then all you'll just do is sew your blocks together to form that row, and then lastly sew your row to complete your quilt top. And here it is. Here is my latest pattern called Dicey Log Cabin. And believe it or not, make sure to like and subscribe to that channel. Hit that notification bell because I will be custom quilting this beauty and also showing you how I came up with the idea on how to quilt it.